How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode number 5 of this animation power tips sponsored by Autodesk. Today we are going to focus on animation layers, and that is very important. So just like the previous episodes where we talked about the graph editor, the hotkeys, setting up Maya. If you haven't watched those 3 episodes, go and watch it. This episode is going to be about the basics of how I use layers, why I use them the way I use them, and why you should perhaps thinking about using this that way, because I feel like it's the most cleanest way for you to use layers, so you're always in control of what you're doing when you're doing it. Also, don't forget to subscribe, join my animation club if you like. Just click the join button and join my workshop where I personalize things a little bit, and 101 will teach you how to actually animate better, cleaner, faster. Let's do it. So here we actually have the character moving and all that good stuff. But most importantly, here on the top right, you find your layers button, and then you have display layers, and then you have animation layers. This is the stuff that actually kind of matters to you as an animator. Now, your animation layers obviously show up only when you click this button, which is create layer. But before we actually go into that, you actually can select any controller that you want in order to add your layer in. Now, I'm going to select the most simplest controller, which is this shoulder controller. And as you can see here, the shoulder controller already has some motion. But the way I normally use layers is basically like I use my base layer. By base layer, I mean the animation layer that you normally animate all your animations. So if you don't have any layers whatsoever, you're animating on your base layer, let's say. So I normally animate and set my poses and do all my animation on the standard layer, no layers whatsoever, just animation raw. So I set my poses, I set my in-betweens, my golden poses, that good stuff. I go into spline, clean up my animation, and make sure to keep it there. When I start to see my animation working, at some point in time, I will actually feel like I want to try certain things that perhaps I don't know if it's going to work. So for this process to actually work, I actually use layers because it's really easy for you to put something on top of the current animation, and then you can just test things out. And if it doesn't work, great, you just delete the layer, go back to your animation. And if it does work, you can like merge it and then use your best layer again. So here I have my animation. As I mentioned, I use something super simple. As you can see, the keys are either on 2s or on 4s. Now let's say that I actually want to try something with the shoulders, because it's the most simple controller. So I would actually select my shoulders. So control and then shift select the other control and press this button here, and it will create a layer. So right now on this layer, there's the controllers, and on the base layer, there's everything else. Now, when I select one of the controllers, before I start doing anything else, I need to set a key on both controllers by pressing S to make sure that my layer is actually active and ready to be animated. A lot of animators, whenever they actually set a layer, they actually go through and they start moving the controller around as soon as you set a layer. Now, I consider that somewhat of a mistake, because it will start giving you a lot of information that you didn't have before, and at some point as you add more layers or you add more controllers to your layer, you will get confusing. So you need to be incredibly organized when you actually work in layers to know exactly what you added to the layer and where do you actually keyed certain parts of the controller. The first thing I do before I move a controller, I start adding keys to the places that I know that I'm going to actually animate. So for example, I have my shoulder here, so I know that, for example, around here I want a little bit of anticipation, so I key it. I don't move the controller just yet, I just key it, and then I go into the next bit. So maybe here I actually don't want that going up so much, so I key it as well. I'll go into the next bit, and I actually kind of go, I think I need a little bit of something here, so I key it. Let me see, around there, same thing. Around there, it's kind of too static, so I'm going to key it as well. Here is still static, so I need a little something here. And then when you get down, maybe I actually want a little bit of up and then down, and the down needs to be bigger, so I key it. And then a little lower here, and then going back to settle. And then around like frame 62, I'm kind of, let's say I'm happy with the animation, right? The way it goes back. So from frame 62, I want to mark it to basically say that this frame right here, I want it exactly like this. And then I actually keyed the last key, which means that on this, because I'm not going to animate it, this section here is going to be the same. Whatever I do here is going to translate to this key. But then after this is almost a marker that is like, don't mess with anything after this stuff. So now we can actually go in and start like animating it, right? So I'm gonna add a little anticipation because it goes down. So the shoulder should be going up. And then here, I'm perhaps gonna like lower it a little bit because it's like a little bit too high. And then he goes up again. So let me just like lower the shoulder again. Then when he goes in between keys, perhaps I want to actually kind of follow that movement. And then at that point, he'll actually kind of go up a little bit to kind of signify that he's going. And then here, still going up a little bit more. And then here is going up still. And then eventually he goes down and then down again to actually make sure that he exhales properly. So he's still exhaling, and then here maybe he goes up a little bit to give anticipation. And then as I mentioned, we don't touch anything here. So now it looks a little bit better, has a little bit more movement and stuff, so it's fine. It's kind of rough because I'm just translating it up and down. I would have actually rotated a little bit better and get a better shape there. But for all intents and purposes, as I'm showcasing layers, this is basically what you will get. And then whenever I actually get to a point that I'm like, you know what, this is really working, I like where this is heading, nice. I would not go to the graph editor here to actually clean it up. Before going to the graph editor, I would actually merge my layers. And the reason why is because right now, if I actually were to go to my animation layer and go to my graph editor, you are going to get a lot of information that actually tells you what this controller is doing. The problem is that this is not the only thing right now, because you can change it if you want to. And you can see that the controller is moving, but this is not the only thing affecting that shoulder right now, because you have also the base layer that is also affecting that shoulder, right? So right now you have two things, base layer and animation layer, affecting that shoulder. And if you go to the graph editor and start to actually manipulate your curves, what you're getting in the end is almost like a double stacked kind of an effect. And the more keys you add to that layer and the more you start working on that layer, the more you're going to get like false positives. So it feels almost like you're getting something, but then when you actually kind of merge it, your graph editor is going to be messy. And you don't want to get your graph editor to be messy, because you want to actually work on that base layer to have that raw animation, so you know exactly as an animator that you're animating exactly what you see, and you can manipulate it as much as you want. Now, before you merge your layers in Maya, make sure that you always go to your option box on your layers. So let me just show you again. So merge layers option box, and make sure that you always select Smart Bake. Once you select it once, it stays put. So make sure you apply. And what Smart Bake does is basically, instead of baking your keys every single frame, which you will get if you don't have Smart Bake, it will just like get your animation, both layers, put it together and just bake it in key by key. Smart Bake will actually find out the difference between keys and will only key the differences between the two layers, so you have the most minimal amount of keys possible for animation, so it doesn't become distracting and starts to look like mocap, right? So if you actually select Smart Bake and then merge, at that point you actually have your animation with as little keys as possible. As you can see, there's like empty keys. As you saw before, I actually had way too many keys in this controller for some reason, but at the moment you don't have keys in every single channel. So that's basically it. So you actually kind of you work on your changes, you merge them, and then you have your raw animation on your base layer. So it's at this point now that I would actually clean up the motion that I did, because now I know that for sure what I see here is what the controller is doing. So at that point, I actually can go here and start cleaning my curves to make sure that everything is like looking really good, and I can delete keys if I want to, like I showed you last time on the last episode with your keyboard, with your hotkeys. just go through, delete anything I don't like, start to kind of like exaggerate some of the stuff that I actually want to actually kind of get more interesting timing in, and just go through like every single key and start cleaning up things as you go. That's basically how I would actually go about working with layers in the most basic way possible when you're working with hand key animation. So it's almost like an enhancement of it. And now, as a last tip, whenever you actually are working on an idea like this, that you put a layer on top and then you start working on an idea, try to actually not go more than about 30 to 40 minutes max on that idea, and then see if it's working or it's not working. Because what I found is that as an animator, you actually want to actually get everything like looking really, really good. What happens in reality is that sometimes you get lost within your own idea and you start seeing other things, and next thing you know, you actually spend 2 hours working on something that might not work in the end. So work about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, show it to your lead if you have one, show it to your supervisor if you have one, see if it's working, that idea that you had. And then at that point, merge them and then clean it up. Most likely your lead, your supervisor will tell you, okay, cool, this is looking good, clean it up, ship it. At that point, merge them, go to your graph editor, and then clean your curves. I'm a big believer that you need to actually work on your base layer, so you actually have that purist vibe of like working pencil and paper, and working on the base layer is the best way to go about it. I have seen animators putting a stack of layers on one on top of the other, and that for different limbs and stuff, and that's cool. That's cool. If it works for you, great, and if you know how to make it work. But for me, keeping it minimal and keeping it simple is the best way for me to keep myself organized. Animation is already difficult as is, so I don't want to make it even more complicated by having to manage layers on top of having to do the animation work. So yeah, that's it. That's all I had for you guys. This is layers in the most simplest way. This is how I use them. I hope it's useful to you guys as it is to me. And as always, see you guys in the next video of Animation Power Tips. Until then, stay well, stay safe. Peace.